Father, slurring. At any given moment, comma, of course, comma, it's quite possible that the roles of Gabby and the father are simultaneously being cosplayed by other couples at the bar Polpo tonight, period. Gabby, Dad, you're so drunk you're reading the stage directions and the punctuation. The waiter returns in a Korean kimono that he's wearing over a full skirt covered with flat black oyster shells. Waiter, hey folks, I'm closing out my shift. Sean's going to be taking care of you for the rest of the night. Sean is a person who honestly doesn't exist. Suddenly, like the dimming of the house lights, a macabre chorus line of shadows cast by the twitching limbs of those enucleated crisis actors out on the piazza darkens the bar, signaling this death-haunted father's impending and much heralded finale. Kermunkachunk is especially lovely at this very moment in time. The robotic vermin are mating. Don't Let This Robot Suck Your Dick Productions is having its annual company picnic out on the steppe, etc., etc. It's also when the polarity of its magnetosphere oscillates for several milliseconds. A signal akin to the flickering of the house lights. Is heaven a planet? We hear a cosplaying daughter ask her father in a creepily fake little girl voice. In another part of the bar, someone says, no hard feelings? And the other responds in a flat, low voice, but I like hard feelings. Gabby's on her cell, texting with Ichiro. Father, what's going on? Gabby, he says he's close, like 5 minutes away. Ichiro is getting to Kermunkachunk sooner than expected. His arrival pushed up because someone had leaked a video spoiling major plot points, e.g. the father's murder of the professor. Father, so? In some variants of the folktale, the father's inability to read the spoken word karaoke screens is attributed not to his drunkenness, but the failing eyesight that's often an early sign of impending death from Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, whose high incidence one of a cohort of scientists here at the bar Polpo with their daughters erroneously attributes to mutations in the mitochondrial genome caused by inhalation of the toxic dust mite feces that constantly blows in from the steppe. Father, so, where are you guys off to, Gabby? We're supposed to go to Great Neck to spend the last night of Hanukkah with his parents. Then we might head up to Ferret's Pringle. Ferret's Pringle? Could such a magical sounding place even exist in this fallen world of ours? According to the brochure, Ferret's Pringle, a post-apocalyptic version of Dawson's Creek or One Tree Hill, will exist as an enlightened sanctuary in some impossibly remote galaxy 1,000 years after the forced evacuation of Kermunkachunk. Gabby's cell vibrates on the table. She picks it up, puts it to her ear. Gabby, into phone. Hi, okay, I'll be right out. Gabby slides out of the booth and puts on her coat. The father stands. They embrace, holding each other tightly, fervently, not speaking. Do either of them actually know that this is the last time they'll ever see each other? Everyone else knows. We know. This is the folktale, after all. It's why there are tears streaming down the cheeks of everyone in the bar Polpo. Everyone. Consanguineous and cosplaying. Father, now I'm seeing double through these tears. 2 of you are leaving now. It's twice as terrible for me. By way of assent, all the other fathers imperceptibly nod and then sink back into the fixity of their own inner worlds. Gabby, remember how much we used to love reading aloud to each other, even FedEx shipping labels, just the blank forms themselves? Remember how much we used to love reading aloud to each other, even FedEx shipping labels, just the blank form themselves, without the addresses even filled in? Her voice breaks. Those were great times. They're reading the screens, but still, come on, this is brutal. Father, I can't stop thinking about Joseph Cotton and Gene Peters and that cabin cruiser out of control, spinning wildly toward the precipice of Niagara Falls. Relationships are like that, don't you think? Like suicide pacts. Gabby, Dad, stop worrying so much. I have a 6th degree black sash and Sayoc Cali Filipino knife fighting. We're driving around in a car with a V6 turbo that reaches 15,000 RPM, goes from 0 to 60 miles per hour in 2.1 seconds, and does 230 miles per hour on the straight. Seriously, what could happen? We'll be fine. Father, I worry. Father, I worry. Gabby, I know. I worry about you too. She hugs him, resting her head on his shoulder. Gabby, I'll text you as soon as we get to Long Island. The father is clutching at straws for something, anything to say that might forestall the actual goodbye, if only for a moment or two, and at the same time wants to avoid the sort of glib palliatives people resort to when they're trying to dodge some inescapable heartbreak. Because it is Gabby, after all, and even now, especially now, under such terribly fraught circumstances, it's essential that she hold him in the highest esteem, and obviously he doesn't want to just blurt out something she might find banal, particularly if it's one of the last things she ever hears him say. Father, gazing out the window through the gel-like vitreous that occludes its panes. Wouldn't it be funny if it turned out that all those murderous little mutants out there on the piazza, those peevish little freaks, that whole horrifying brood of rampaging, psychopathic musical theater kids, turned out to be nothing more than a bunch of flouncing puppets, just a bunch of harmless marionettes made out of wood and cloth? Gabby. But that wouldn't change anything, would it? Wouldn't change how much I'm going to miss you. She hugs him again, clutching him tightly, breaking the embrace to fix him at arm's length so she can lovingly scrutinize his face, as if trying to inscribe his features permanently in her memory. And then, sobbing softly, she kisses him tenderly, each temple, one final time. The structural integrity of Gabby and her father's love for each other, including the anguish this love begets, is, pace biz, seemingly invulnerable, impervious to metafictional destabilization or Dadaist malware. Like some extremophilic organism, the tube worm that can survive temperatures of 700 degrees Fahrenheit in hydrothermal vents, or the habro-braken he-beater, the tiny parasitic wasp that can tolerate 18,000 grays of gamma radiation, whereas 5 grays will kill a human. The dramaturgic potency, i.e. capacity to move an audience, of their devotion to each other, their grief at parting, can withstand even the most elaborate artifices and aggressive alienation effects. Yes, they are, along with everyone else at the bar, rotely, atavistically reenacting the folktale with all its predeterminations. But they are, in fact, in real life, actually parting from each other for the very last time, and it's excruciatingly hard to watch. Somehow, remarkably, the ventriloquism inherent in the spoken word karaoke doesn't vitiate the pathos, the, quote, scabrous weepiness, end of quote, of it all. It doesn't detract from how sad, how incredibly sad this is. Father, his voice tremulous with emotion. Goodbye, sweetie. Gabby. Goodbye, Dad. I love you so much. Gabby walks off and exits the bar. Through the blur of his tears, the father looks out the window and watches her traverse the piazza and somehow squeeze into Ichiro's injection site red Formula 1 Ferrari, which pulls away, pelted with eyeballs. Almost immediately after Gabby leaves the bar pulpo, all the other daughters, real and feigned, consanguineous and cosplaying, also leave en masse. The seated fathers remain for the next several moments absolutely motionless, each like a Belvedere torso. That headless marble statue of the nude Ajax in the act of contemplating his suicide. Then a B flat, 57 octaves below middle C, emanates from an explosive event at the edge of a supermassive black hole 240 million light years away, sending a belch of what smells like vomit, feces, urine, etc., masked by apple cinnamon air freshener across the galaxies, signaling to the Father that it's time to enter the men's room and undergo his preordained transfiguration. Long ago, there wasn't a door per se to the men's room, but a sapphire blue needle-wrought tapestry, upon which representations of the Snellen chart, that childhood scene in which the father approaches the teacher's desk, cradling his own brain in his hands, the killing of the professor, the departure of Gabby, etc., had been embroidered. But here tonight, it's a standard 14-gauge prison-grade steel door with its pictogram of a headless torso through which the father enters. Pissing, he's only half conscious of the robotic vermin with their flanged metal exoskeletons, gleaming mandibles, and piercing proboscises. Others more delicate, origami-ish, some Lego-like and polychromatic tunics, all singing as they flit from urinal cake to urinal cake. And when this drunk, bleary-eyed father stands in front of that mirror hung askew over the sink, and a strobe-like mise-en-abyme is generated by the reflections of the mirror and the pupils of his eyes ricocheting back and forth at the speed of light, his heart, as per the brochure, becomes the wedding chapel in which his two dissociative personality states, the divine hermit and the CMF warlord, are married. I'm weeping over this. Just kidding, I just had to blow my nose. In that instant, when your brain vitrifies what flashes before your eyes, it's pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Quote, demon-possessed hares literally tearing normal nice hares new assholes with their freshly sprouted fangs, and the expression on the face of one of the nice hares like, quote, I saw this coming a long time ago, end of quote. Black-frocked rabbis on racing bikes, their bifurcated beards flapping in the wind, gorging on puff pastries stuffed with chartreuse butterfly eggs, or whatever the hell that green stuff is, that the French women seem to be flinging at them along the route. Limbless ghouls slithering up from the hair and semen-clogged shower drains in every imaginable locker room. A Playboy bunny breastfeeding Willie Nelson. The mind reels. All you really know is that these are someone's fantasies, but not yours. End of quote. So writes the poet and Chilesian mafia faction ideologue Jingleheimer Schmidt in his prison notebooks, the same Jingleheimer Schmidt whose illegible poem, quote, Aftermath, end of quote, will appear on a truck-mounted screen on the step after the forced evacuation of Kermunkachunk. It's at that very moment, in that synaptic millisecond, just as we're about to stagger back into the bar, that we realize that not only are we not autonomous beings possessed of free will, but we're not even the algorithmically scripted characters in a simulation. We're the flouncing digital marionettes in the video game that the algorithmically scripted characters in the simulation are playing on their phones as they sit on the toilet in the restroom of some bar. We're so far from having any control over what happens to us, it's not even funny. Well, that's not true, actually. It is funny. I'm going to reread that. We're so far from having any control over what happens to us, it's not even funny. Well, that's not true. Actually, it is funny. This is the core idea. If, in the non-orientable wormhole that is Chilesia, you begin as Noel Gallagher and complete the loop, you'll have returned to exactly the same place, except mirror reversed as Liam. But this is where the gravy comes in. You have to be looped. This is why the playwright Siddhartha Strawberry's desublimated remix of Oedipus at Colonus in which an old drunk and his daughter walk into a bar in Colonus on a Thursday night is such a guilty pleasure, so much more entertaining than the original. Per the brochure, quote, Siddhartha Strawberry is the largest cricket ever found, end of quote. The men's room is both honeymoon suite and tomb, party and after party. Here, Eros and Thanatos in their matching black velour tracksuits, red checked scarves and motocross goggles, drunk on tantric cocktails of Menses and antifreeze, perform their first and last dance as husband and wife. Now about to stagger back into the bar and perform his own dance of death, his hand clasped on the handle of the men's room door, the father hesitates. Like Empedocles, perched on the crater's rim, before casting himself into the volcanic fires of Mount Etna. The eggs are hatching in his head. Hey. Hey. Get some. Get some. Hey. When the father emerges, he gazes disconcertedly across the bar toward the empty booth where he and Gabby had been sitting, almost as if he's momentarily forgotten that she left. The alcohol seems to hit him with a delayed, cumulative, pent-up force. A wave of gravy, a lifetime of gravy hits him and literally knocks him off his feet. Or is it his own incipient Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, the symptoms of which he'd never acknowledged out of fear of alarming his daughter, or the magnifying effect of both his intoxication and the CJD that causes the father to spin and fall as he does? He struggles to stand, to walk, but his direct line from point A to point B, from men's room to booth, shatters into a delirium of vectors. He staggers, caroming into every surface he encounters. Now a human pong ball, erratically traversing the bar back and forth in a welter of veering zigzags, cross-hatching the bar's space, repeatedly collapsing in vertiginous pirouettes, groveling along the floor on all fours, somehow clambering again to his feet, lurching along another haphazard oblique trajectory, gesticulating like an airline attendant in an effort to navigate himself, teetering in circles, grasping for imaginary overhead handrails like a brachiating chimp until he impacts another table or another wall and whirls uncontrollably to the ground in a heap. Exuding death outward in every direction, he mimes the act of tenderly sponge bathing the grim reaper, a spasm-driven gesture of the arm that begins by heading violently in exactly the opposite direction to the sponge before tracing a wide arc of flight in space and then buckling in on itself to finally grasp it. Then a synchronized platform dive in which his two dissociative personality states, the divine hermit and the CMF warlord, perform an arm stand reverse somersault in the tuck position into the bottomless pit. He's fantastic, murmurs one of the fathers, one of the Bruegel men. To another, balletamanes among the decrepit alcoholics in attendance. Even the fluorescent yellow marzipan golf balls, who've seen it all over the years, seem mesmerized. He mimes pounding red-hot metal on an anvil, grinding and sharpening it into a dagger, He tears open his shirt, offering his breast, and plunges the blade repeatedly into his heart, falling and dying, while the dogs outside set up a fearful howling, enucleating his own eyeballs, flinging them at the spoken word karaoke screens. This is, by the way, a dance that is still performed by Chilesian fathers at the weddings of their daughters. Like Cagney at the end of the Roaring Twenties, a bullet in his back, running clumsily out of pure instinct, stumbling up some church steps, back down again, and crumpling in a lifeless heap. Sometimes he lies down on the floor as if he's in bed with his wife, who, in her sleep, has pulled the comforter up over her head so that in the dark it looks like some huge triangular liturgical headdress. It's as if he's in a dream, but asleep in the dream, lying horizontally across the front seat of a car, unable to steer or brake the car, rolling over the curb across the sidewalk into a storefront, the sound of the shattering window that awakens him simply a shot glass that's been smashed on the floor of the bar. Speak, Shiva Nataraja, Lord of Dance. Speak, Terpsichore, who plucks her lyre, tripping on hallucinogenic lozenges. Speak of the father's traumatized body that screams in agony, writhing as if consumed by fire, as if he's being burnt at the stake, signaling through the flames. How he gestures out to the other fathers, waving to them like a beauty queen in a parade. Now fists brandished at an uncomprehending world, a mad scientist on a lightning-riven night. Now a man, his foot encased in a pail of hardened cement, dragging it across the pavement. Then, skipping, blowing kisses, innumerable kisses that form floating whorls of little red hearts in his wake. Now handcuffed to a pipe in a basement, unraveling the knot of his own existence. Now a fetus in a shoe caddy? I'm guessing here. And then the graceful delicacy with which he counterlevers his weight on one foot, laying bare the pharynx, the esophagus, the urethra, the anus, using obviously fake Hawaiian storytelling hand movements to enumerate the central tropes of the 21st century and horrifying prefigurations of the 22nd and the 23rd. Now stooped like an old cobbler, now flattened roadkill, now you see him, now you don't, crawling through these catacombs of smoke and darkness, clawing at his own skin. The eggs have hatched, the things are writhing in his head. Imagine what that's like, a rudderless, mastless ship disappearing into the sea mist, a girl weeping on the shore. To the father, this dance of death is an epic odyssey from his mother's womb to the Valhalla of robots situated at the terminal point of a wormhole so impossibly far into the future that its existence is hypothesized only through the most abstruse and exotic mathematics imaginable. To anyone else watching, it's just a drunk stumbling back from the men's room to his seat. And so, finally reeling, the father braces himself against a wooden post at the far end of the room. He gathers himself, he squints, trying to focus his eyes, and commits to a heedless line that diagonally bisects the entire bar, and he careens, his body canted at an impossible angle, toward the booth where he and Gabby had spent the evening. And he somehow swerves backward and ends up propped upright in his seat, cataleptic, a shoe in his mouth, gripped like a fish between his teeth. And then, pitching forward slightly, listing slowly until his forehead is flush against the tabletop. And there he remains, to this day. Around him, an audience of his peers, these grizzled ghosts, their faces haggard, creviced with care, flushed with alcohol, brutal faces, these old fathers, all of whom had signed tight non-disclosure agreements. Each the wobbling, moribund protagonist of his own disaggregated solar system. each the wobbling, moribund protagonist of his own disaggregated solar system. Shortly after the father's dance of death, say 15-20 minutes later, all the divine hermits commit ritual hara-kiri en masse in the floating casino at Lake Little Lake. Prompted by the revolutionary suicide of these antinomian mystics, the Chilesian mafia faction blows up everything in Kermunkachunk and forcibly evacuates the entire population. A poem entitled Aftermath by one of the country's most beloved poets and an important CMF ideologue, Jingleheimer Schmidt, more about whom later, appears on a single truck-mounted spoken-word karaoke screen on the steppe, that immense glazed plateau in the middle of Chilesia, once populated by a now extinct population living in inflatable bounce houses and ball pits. The poem is completely illegible. White text on a white screen, like those old DLTRSYD screenplays which were written in goat's milk on white cotton to keep them secret. Although these are lyrics that any school child would have been able to recite from memory without recourse to a text, custom would have required the kids, all adults on the steppe were referred to as NPZSYGUYDG, quote, children, end of quote, to cast their gazes up at the illegible white-on-white screen and belt it out, but there are no school children, no kids. No NPZSYGUYDG left. Everyone out here is extinct. We present the poem as it now appears on the truck-mounted spoken-word karaoke screen on the steppe, white on white, and on the facing page as it originally appeared in Old Man's Head grafted onto a young man's jacked body, the collected poems of Jingleheimer Schmidt. DLTRSYD books. Predictably, critics have come to prefer the current version, praising its indexical evocation of a paradisiacal, pre-discursive state prior to the accretions of language, i.e. the aftermath, end of quote. Although the book itself has been out of print for some 35,000 years, scientists using loop-mediated isothermal amplification protocols were able to, quote, coax, end of quote, some of the white letters from the white background of the, quote, empty, end of quote, screen and reverse engineer the poem. Oh, I can't wait to hear this. Aftermath. Nose blown. Nikki steps out into the hot sun. Ricky's still half asleep and languishes in the revolving door. Mitch is MIA altogether. When they get to dinner, Esther's in a booth, drinking coffee and doodling on a placemat. "Where's Mitch?" she asks. Nikki shrugs. "Fuck, I know." So for all intents and purposes, there's nothing to read on this truck-mounted spoken-word karaoke screen and no one to read it. Though officially designated a psychodramatic milieu and contested cultural space, this steppe is completely empty. Magnificent, awe-inspiring, pristine, shimmering, numinous, etc., but empty. Every so often, a guy pushing a shopping cart with a cooler in it appears, yelling, "Ice-cold water! Ice-cold water!" Otherwise, nothing. Nothing. Except the occasional brightly colored hollow plastic ball rolling past. A forlorn vestige of that bygone epoch of bounce houses and ball pits. Thousands of years ago, a Mr. Softy truck strayed into Chilesian territory onto the steppe, its driver having become disoriented by the reflective, non-orientable surfaces of the topography. It was almost immediately destroyed by a Hellfire air-to-ground missile fired from a Reaper drone hovering over the steppe at 50,000 feet. It was almost immediately destroyed by a Hellfire air It was almost immediately destroyed by a Hellfire air-to-ground missile fired from a Reaper drone hovering over the steppe at 50,000 feet. But the digital chime unit that plays the Mr. Softy jingle is essentially indestructible. It is encased in multiple layers of corrosion-resistant titanium armor plating, with carbon, graphite, and silica ceramic insulation, making it capable of withstanding an impact of 3,400 G. Temperatures of over 18,030 Fahrenheit. Penetration, crushing, fire, deep sea pressure, seawater immersion, etc., etc. The box has never been located, but the jingle can be heard playing perpetually across these vast, desolate, bluish-white, and eerily beautiful expanses which seem to extend limitlessly in all possible directions. Making way for Siddhartha Strawberry's The Virgin Widow, starring YouTube mukbang star Peggy Neo and 90 Day Fiancé alumnus Colt Johnson. Last Orgy of the Divine Hermit closes on June 26, 2035, a Thursday, father-daughter night. At the cast party, which constitutes the penultimate scene in this variant of the folktale, we're witness to jarringly comradely behavior between the actor playing the father and the actors who played the men who assaulted him in the men's room, forcing a robotic insect into his ear. But what's even more startling is that the actor playing the father is obviously dating, i.e. involved in a romantic sexual relationship with, the actress playing Gabby. And in one variant of the variant, the same actors playing the father and Gabby also play respectively the optometrist and the patient from the introduction, the latter mirroring yet mitigating through their transferential, counter-transferential dynamic, the incestuous implications of the former. As the cast party winds down, the actor who's been playing the father arranges for an Uber. A UFO arrives. It's clearly an extraordinary craft deploying astronautic technology far beyond anything we're currently capable of, but inside, the vibe is very Cinco de Mayo party bus. In fact, one would be forgiven for mistaking this for the wedding celebration of Balloon Boy and Pebbles Tubin. The UFO is scheduled to pick up a fall-down drunk pair of middle-aged women at the Baikonur Cosmodrome launch site in Kazakhstan, and then head for an exoplanet located in the triple star Alpha Centauri system, which will take centuries, if not thousands of years, to reach. Just before entering the UFO, the actor playing the father unexpectedly turns and addresses the audience, us. Actor playing the father. I'd just like to thank the Divine Hermits for their tireless shuffling of lettered tiles at the floating casino, without which none of this would have been even remotely possible. He waves. It's oddly reminiscent of Nixon's stiff wave goodbye as he boarded the helicopter and departed from Washington for the last time. There's that same sense, I suppose, of it didn't have to end this way. Then he and his girlfriend step aboard the UFO, which, accelerating to hypersonic speeds almost instantaneously, disappears into an undulating column of molten silver. For evocations of a father's exquisite love for his daughter, it's impossible to surpass. In its pathos and eloquence, this concluding letter, written by the revered Chilean poet and CMF ideologue Jingleheimer Schmidt from his prison cell on the eve of his execution. The next morning at dawn, he'd be fastened to the sidewalk on his back, face up, and an air conditioner would be accidentally dropped on him from the upper story window of an apartment building. As brutal as this may sound, execution by falling air conditioner had actually been developed as a humane alternative to more torturous forms of capital punishment. Jingleheimer was a taunting allusion to the well-known children's song that Schmidt was subjected to by his classmates early in his life, a nickname he defiantly resurrected as both nom de guerre and nom de plume when he joined the Chilean mafia faction. This rhapsodic, achingly beautiful expression of an imprisoned father's fathomless love for his beloved little girl is like the gamma-ray burst that is the final breath of a dying star. His annihilation will do nothing to diminish the vital force of his love for her. In fact, he writes, "It is a love that will be endlessly multiplied He uses the word meaning mutated. By death itself, a mutating love whose meanings and articulations will proliferate infinitely in an infinity of proliferating universes, while simultaneously its massive gravity will pitilessly devour time and space until everything in existence recollapses into a dimensionless singularity, i.e. the last orgy. No translation, however deft and delicately attuned, could possibly do justice to the lyricism and poetic conceptual density of the letter as composed. And we would do a great disservice to the memory of this father and to his daughter, his only heir, if we didn't quote this heartbreaking farewell, excerpts of which are included in the brochure and which stream illegibly across the truck-mounted screen on the step, in its entirety and in the original Chilesian. Quelles vrije gorge je ooit volgens de roem op dit goed benap kijk vond jump voor de diep jump voor de bojojo il is voor goedchen line joyce you to get if the for en nooit get of fun hebben pim hach ek pim jack atsper met jack rollen pap jump communication off outcome your trunk goed. About the author. Mark Lehner is the author of the novels Gone with the Mind, The Sugar-Frosted Nutsack, My Cousin, My Gastroenterologist,